Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, where you're listening from today. We're so glad you could join us today on a conversation of two key focus areas for ISACA, digital trust and information security. I'm John Brandt, Director of Professional Practices and Innovation, and joining me today is Chris McGowan, ISACA's new Information Security Practices Principal. Chris is the newest member of my team, hired less than a month ago. But while new to ISACA and the association world, he served in many roles and mission areas within his new area of responsibility. Like myself, Chris was also in the Navy, and I'm absolutely thrilled for the opportunity to work alongside him again. Please say hello and indicate where you're from in the comments section, and then add any comments and questions along the way, and we'll get to as many as we can. For those of you that may be unfamiliar with ISACA's work and journey into digital trust, it's probably worth just spending a moment to do a little bit of level setting here. ISACA defines digital trust as the confidence and the integrity of relations, interactions, and transactions among providers and consumers within an associated digital ecosystem. Integrity refers to a code of moral values. It's just not the traditional security definition. It's essential to consider the entire ecosystem, which often involves more than two parties. And this is just getting more complicated by the day, arguably. Security, privacy, risk, assurance, quality, and governance contribute to and can uphold digital trust. Ethics, transparency, and accountability are absolutely important and play a significant role in encompassing a brand, product quality, data ethics, and reliability. Digital trust use cases include business to business, business to consumer, business to employee, business to government, and even government constituent, and just a lot of different ways here. Really, at the end of the day, digital trust can be thought of as an overarching umbrella of existing focus areas, especially here at ISACA. The focus of today's conversation is on security, which coincides with National Cybersecurity Awareness Month here in the United States. So to kick off our conversation and introduce my colleague and my guest here today, Chris, from an information security perspective, what does digital trust mean to you?
So digital trust, well, welcome everyone. I'm glad to be here. Digital trust, to be honest, is a term that's fairly new to me. Jumped right into it when I became part of ISACA. And it's kind of opened my mind quite a bit, because as security professionals, we get so wound tight about what our job role is and how to, better do our job or whatever you're responsible for, being more secure. But digital trust to me is more an overall umbrella or, guidelines to bring everything together to make the actual security posture of whatever your organization might be stronger.
And there you go. And really, I think that's an important part that you drove home, because whether you're a security practitioner, risk professional, audit and insurance person, we historically tend to have narrower line, areas of focus, right? And we do need to broaden our perspective. And I think security practitioners have been well positioned for this, at least at the security management, because we're largely business enablers, right? So you're having to work across the company or an organization, or if you're on a government or whatnot. So definitely all important stuff there. So we touched on, during my intro, I touched on, the different facets that would go into digital trust. Of all of those, again, today's focus is on information security. Why is that such an important component of digital trust?
I mean, it's in the name, right? Security. There's all different aspects of it, but, when it comes to information security, you have to have a baseline, you have to have your stuff locked down, right? Because if you don't, what does it really matter what the end user does if your organization doesn't have, a streamlined security program, whatever it may be? It doesn't really matter. If you don't have that, how are people going to, how is the information going to be secure, right?
And I arguably, along that line, like let's just really acknowledge the fact that, it no longer are we living in a centralized world, right? Like at the end of the day, and this was already starting long before the pandemic hit with just, security practitioners, we're charged with actually trying to, we're mitigating risk across both people, people and technology, right, and processes, and which is a tall order to begin with. So now we've got this swath of data, that is just no longer centrally located. So it really truly magnifies the risk across the board. And important, and even more to your point, like, so security is it's a state of mind. And I think this is something that largely gets lost out there. There's no easy button for what security people have to do. There's no life hack, right? There's no, the proverbial, easy button, we'd see on.
It's ever changing, right? Things, everybody knows. If you don't stay up to date with everything going on in the world, you'll fall behind, and it's going to be hard to catch back up.
And that's absolutely, it takes me to my next point, which, as we kind of drive our viewers to, to learn more about our work and the digital trust ecosystem framework. But that's what the framework is meant to do. It's really to acknowledge the fact that there's so many interdependencies out there, and to be aware of them and sensitive to them, because there are these ebbs and flows and tensions that are going to happen across any organization that's out there that can affect overall security posture.
Absolutely.
So how are security practitioners, including so many of our members, already supporting and advancing digital trust?
If you think about it, there's tens of thousands of members who already have obtained the CISM certification, which, it obviously demonstrates that they already have the expertise and they're working in the fields that support digital trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want, for all those that are on, online, CISM just continues to be one of the most highly regarded security certifications out there, especially, at the management leadership levels across the board. The last count, like, we're just over 48,000 certified, CISMs that are out there, and information security governance, program development management, incident management, and risk management. All of those are absolutely key critical tenets and help support digital trust. So what can information security practitioners do to drive digital trust initiatives within their organization?
Honestly, I think I'm a huge component of this, and I think that it's really important and sometimes underutilized. It's communication. As security practitioners, we know how to do our jobs, right? But if you don't express to both, leadership and the average end user, why you do what you do, why it's important, people can get caught up in just doing their day-to-day job, and especially in leadership. You're fortunate if you have supervisor and leadership that understand what you do, but in my experience, a lot of the times you don't. They know how to manage, they know how to run whatever organization it may be, but they might not understand what it means when you're like, hey, we need to do this. We need to lock down this. We need to try and do this, or whatever it may be. To them, it might just be, you talking in geek speak, not really portraying to them exactly why it's important. And I think the framework itself, it breaks it down and so that everybody's on the same page.
And I'm so glad that you talked about communication here. Soft skills continues to be just a huge pain point, not only for security, but the greater IT profession here, right? Like, we put so much focus over the years on the technical skills, and I'm not trying to diminish that at all, but increasingly we have there's a lot of strong voices out in the industry saying, anybody who's got some kind of aptitude and willingness to learn, we can teach them that. But it's the the communication, how you articulate things, how you can break down complex things for non-technical audiences. And that's largely where our profession has fallen down, right? At the end of the day, it's like, what is the impact? And, and for somebody new to the profession or to an organization, that could be a little challenging. But at the end of the day, if you've been in a role for some length of time, you must have some kind of understanding of your company or your organization's business, who your customers are, why you do it, in order to actually come out there and affect change and to best protect all the assets that you're charged with. Let's see. So what are the key touch points between an organization and its suppliers, vendors, and supply chain regarding digital trust?
Well, I think it falls similar to what we just spoke on, communication, as in being upfront about how their security practices are. Because, you think of it like a house, right? Or an organization, whatever you want to word it as. The minute your information leaves where is secure and goes to supply chain, whatever it may be, you have to be confident and trusting that your information is going to be just as secure as the way you had it, in-house. So I think it's just a key point to have that open communication to where, like, hey, if there's a security concern, it's openly talked about and either mitigated or, that's what drives people to possibly even move to a different supplier or whatever it may be. So from the supplier standpoint, I think it's just important to be open and honest on your security practices to make everybody more comfortable and trustworthy, as we've been talking about.
No, that's a good point here. And, and you look at some of the different things that are happening out there, and arguably when you look at global economies and the pros and cons of that, and, we saw during the pandemic where there were components that were interrupted, there were services that were interrupted, there were all those different things. And arguably, I think for anybody who's in security for any length of time, like, it's not whether, the likelihood of anybody having some kind of cybersecurity incident is very high. Like, we have to take a step back, and this idea that you'll never have an incident is unrealistic. But what are you doing? Do you have those pre-planned procedures in place? How are you going to communicate? Crisis communications. And again, this is where the inner workings of an organization and how you're going to kind of step through those things and prepare for it could be beneficial in actually, being forthcoming with your customers, with your clients, members, whatever it may be. Is, I think, for me, that's an important thing. Is, okay, we acknowledge something bad happened, but this is what we're doing about it.
Exactly.
But that's not to say that you could just put your head in the proverbial sand and just throw caution to the wind. And I think this is ideally that, consumers at large, and whether it's an individual consumer or a company as a consumer buying services, they're going to demand more, right? The expectation should go up. And ideally then the more that you're affecting change internally and people, this feel-good mechanism, that it then drives betterments out in the industry, and I don't think at the end of the day, it's a fine line. You don't want to necessarily, the goal is not to take decision-making away, right? Because at the end of the day, part of the great thing about business, they make business-related decisions, but we also know that that type of thing varies. It's highly variable depending on organizational size, your industry, geographic location. Moving ahead here, as many of you heard, we have a digital trust ecosystem framework launching in early fourth quarter. Chris, while the framework is meant for many audiences, how will security practitioners find it useful?
Well, I mean, it's a framework, right? If you think about what that means, it's like a structure. It's like a backbone, a starting point to develop organizationally specific guidelines and best practices, things like that, to help strengthen the digital trust framework. ISACA, here at ISACA, we're actually developing or working on security specific lenses to bring that to the forefront and reinforce the core framework development.
Very good. From your perspective, what are the biggest trends in priorities in security right now?
So obviously that question is, everyone will have their, specific opinions on, what's the latest, greatest, hottest thing out there. But for me personally, since the pandemic, cloud computing is huge. It's just the way things seem to be going. At a previous job, we upgraded all the switches, across the huge network, and we had to learn a different way of securing things because it was all cloud-based management. It wasn't, consoling into switches and doing it that way. So we had to learn very quickly with the pandemic, as everybody knows. There's been a lot of changes. But the biggest thing for me, to be honest, is the social engineering side of it, because us as security professionals, we for the most part, and I say for the most part because people make mistakes, we understand, what we should and shouldn't do in regards to security. But, you can keep your house clean, but as soon as you go somewhere else, or the end user, depending on the organization, might not understand, that, hey, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. That's bringing, I have an old email address. I still get crazy emails that I don't even look at, obviously, because they're like, oh, you've just won something, let me get your information. But the average person, think about somebody low in income. You just won some money. We just need this information. Some people, without even thinking, will gladly put that information out there. But I think the only way to combat that is, yet again, more communication. Drill it into people like, hey, security training and things like that are really the only way to help with the human side of it. You can lock down hardware all you want, but in the end of the day, there's still people typing away on computers, right? So I just think it's going to continue to be one of the biggest trending issues right now. You could search all you want and research all you want, and it all comes down to that.
So that's a good point here, and this being Cybersecurity Awareness Month here, and this has long been a pain point of mine, right? Because awareness by itself does not infer that we're doing anything to prepare end users, right? If they are truly, we talk about them, being first line of defense and the human firewall and stuff like that. And I that's why the awareness, to me, if you look at what you just described here, is awareness is going on, being like, we're seeing this specific thing coming into the company, right? We're seeing phishing attempts. This is kind of what it looks like. That doesn't tell a user what the heck to do, right? At the end of the day, and depending on your individual technologies and what you have there, Outlook has plugins for reporting phishing and stuff and whatnot. There's different capabilities out there, but whatever it is, and again, recognizing that, our viewership and our members are serving companies of all sizes and whatnot, from very small teams to, Fortune, 50 companies. At the end of the day, is we got to give them the tools to be successful, and not only just in the context of their work life, because increasingly, especially, as a lot of folks are still not back in a permanent office, they, more now than ever, their personal, professional lives have kind of been intertwined there. So can you share with us what ISACA has accomplished or is working on of interest to our viewers?
Absolutely. So the CISM certification has just recently, this last summer, been released, updated and released, which is always good, right? There's been a few white papers that have been released, specifically one titled Defending Data Smartly, and another one, Zero Trust, How to Beat Adversaries at Their Own Game. And then, of course, I personally am involved in this as well, reviewing content for various skill-based courses to update them to, be more relevant to the time.
Last thing I also want to just kind of piggyback onto that is with it being National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, ISACA is running a promotion on its Cybersecurity Fundamentals Certificate program, 20% off. That's a pretty darn good deal. It's no longer just knowledge-based. There is a skills-based component to that. Really cool stuff that's going on there. Just going to take a moment here and see if we got any questions from our viewers here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick, watching the stream of everyone saying where they're from, it's pretty eye-opening to me because, being new to ISACA and understanding what ISACA does, it really shows that people around the world, work together to make a more secure environment to work in. And I'm really excited to be here and to work with everyone.
So it looks like we did have one question that asked, do we have enough practitioners in the field? And the resounding answer is no. This is not new. Everybody has been, has long reported on the doom and gloom aspect, if you will. Something that we really, in our work with our annual State of Cybersecurity report, that we really continue to drill down on is reporting that we don't have enough people is just no longer enough. Like at the end of the day, so here at ISACA, we've really been trying to continue to refine our questions to provide some actionable information out to those. And just one example of that to folks was, not with the 2022 report. In 2021, we were looking, there was a couple things that we were monitoring with the pandemic. And we also were like, we need to expand the pathways. We, as hiring managers, you need to take a step back. You need to not really revisit your job descriptions and your job requirements. It's nice to have a laundry list of all the things you want to have done, but the proverbial unicorns out there are just few and far between. And for a lot of our companies that are out there, you're not going to eat. If you do find them, arguably you may not be able to even compensate them. So especially at your lower level roles, your entry level positions, it's really worthwhile to take a harder look as to what the core things that you need to do. And we continue to drive that message home there with that. That's where our research has kind of indicated, and we could speak very confidently on the importance of soft skills. And to be fair, this is not specific to just cyber or the greater IT community, right? Like all occupations are really facing this right now. And whereas it's not necessarily, in my view, our problem to solve, we're the one that really needs to deal with it because we are business enablers. We are charged with working with business leaders across organizations to understand their business, help communicate the threats that are continually evolving, this threat landscape that just continues to move, and help them make informed decisions to basically carry out organizational objectives. Chris, I want to thank you for joining me this morning. Again, thrilled for you joining the team here. Please visit www.isaca.org/digital trust here to find several resources from ISACA, including a white paper and online digital trust course that are both free for ISACA members. So thanks again to everybody who tuned in, and wish everybody a great day.